Welcome back. A survey from Wisconsin's largest police union this week suggests growing support for law enforcement and growing concern for public safety. I'm joined by the group's executive director, Jim Palmer. Jim, thanks for coming in today.
Good morning.
Before we actually get into the poll results, I want to first talk about poll methodology. Why should people trust the results of this poll? Besides being a union, the WPPA is involved in a lot of legislative testimony, so these results, I imagine, could be used in hearings. So how do we know this poll represents an even smattering across the state, if you will?
Sure. Well, each year we've commissioned this poll through the St. Norbert College Strategic Research Institute. And, we identify the areas in which we'd like to gauge public perception, but we really leave it to the scientists at St. Norbert's to craft the questions, because we're not trying to derive a particular answer. We really want an objective measure that's supported by the demographic, categories and the breakdown of the state as a whole. And this year, over 1,100 respondents participated in the survey, and we have a very high confidence that it represents how Wisconsinites feel.
Is that the largest number to participate?
Yes.
Okay. Now, 1,000 Wisconsinites, when we look at the results, however, say when 90% support law enforcement or whatever, are we talking about people evenly divided across Madison, Milwaukee, and rural Wisconsin?
Yeah, I mean, the breakdown is, again, it matches the demographic breakdown by region and by state, and so I think it is very representative of the state and how, Wisconsinites, regardless of where they live, probably feel on these issues.
So let's talk top-line results. What do you think are the most striking findings from the poll?
Well, there's quite a bit. And, since launching this 10 years ago, I mean, we've been the only law enforcement group in the country that does it. And we've undertaken this endeavor because we want to, lead a proactive and take a proactive role in the public dialogue that surrounds policing. It's clear that Wisconsinites place public safety at a premium. They do view law enforcement officers and hold them in very high regard. But it's clear that they're also very aware that, violent crime in this state is increasing. And so public safety is very important to them. And that's true across demographic categories.
There was also some support for body cameras, school resource officers. Those are particularly hot button issues here in Madison in our department. What's kind of the big findings there?
Well, it's always interesting, regardless of, what community is, whenever these issues, certain issues arise, there are advocates at the local level that make certain representations about how, let's say, communities of color feel about, let's say, school resource officers. And so we wanted to kind of, test and measure some of those perceptions and those representations. And we were a little bit surprised to find that, with regard to body-worn cameras, Wisconsinites across demographic categories consistently have strong support for body-worn cameras. They're willing to even pay more in the form of local taxes for them, which we think is interesting. And there's even greater support amongst minorities in Wisconsin for body-worn cameras. They identify it as an immediate concern. With regard to SROs, we're also surprised to see that that a majority of people believe that school resource officers make the school safer. A majority do not agree that SROs adversely impact the learning environment or that they criminalize ordinary student behavior. And these kind of run contrary to some of the representations we've seen in communities like Madison.
And then in terms of running contrary, the last question for you, you found some disparities between what people think happened in critical incidents involving police and police shootings and the actual stats of police shootings, if you want to expand on that.
Absolutely. This is we've posed these questions year in and year out, and it's a little concerning to us. Whereas Wisconsinites across demographic categories have a very accurate perception of violent crime. Violent crime has increased here in Wisconsin at a greater rate than it has nationally. There are some perceptions amongst minorities, in particular relative to officer-involved shootings, that aren't supported by the data. A majority of minority respondents in our poll appear to believe that most of the people shot by officers here in this state are unarmed and people of color. And in fact, the reverse is true. Just last year, for example, 100% of the individuals fatally shot by officers in this state were armed, and about 6 out of 22 of the people shot were people of color. So the vast majority were white.
Jim, thanks so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.